The reigning major champions are still looking for their first win. Somebody's starting off the stage 0-3 again. Two top three teams dust up in an early stage of fray, and the longest running rivalry in the NAL kicks up yet again. The kicker? We're only on day 3, baby, and it's a damn good day to be an NAL Stage fan. Welcome back to Stage 2 of the NAL. I'm Caliber Jacob Anderson. I'm here with Excellence Gaming alumni Gabriel Laxing Marilez and lunatic esports superstar himself, Davide Foxy Bucci. Gentlemen, welcome back to Philly on a Thursday night.
That was crazy. Well, I know we say Philly, but to the people on Twitter, I called this Beijing, China, so we're back.
Why is that the storyline you keep running?
You know, technically, I'm still Excellence alumni, too.
Yeah,
that's true. I just went to Wikipedia and found like the first team that you played Pro League for, like way back in like the old days.
Yeah,
right.
We went to Cologne with Excellence. It was a great time.
Long time ago.
Long time ago. Do you remember anything from back then, or is it just all a blur? Like just the lanes you played, like whatever.
I remember everything.
Yeah,
remember everything.
I remember when Xbox joined PC and like Elevate.
I remember getting the email saying, "Hey, congratulations on winning the World Championship. Good luck on PC."
And look at where it ended these guys up. So there's a couple of things we have to go through first today. Operation Twin Shells did release back on Tuesday. Hopefully those of you who have been able to play it are enjoying your time with it thus far. But there are a couple of things we need to talk about. The first of them is, at least in competitive competition, Scopos will not be available. This is something you may have seen an announcement about earlier. At least for the foreseeable future in NAL competition. You guys can go and play her in ranked, but at least for right now, we won't be seeing her in the NAL.
I'm a little sad. I always like to see, the pro players be able to introduce a new operator, see how it's played, but definitely understandable why something might be quarantined. Obviously, there's a bug, and that needs to be addressed, and I think for competitive, I 100% believe for competitive integrity that this is important, that things are going to be fixed, and then maybe we'll see Scopos later on. Yeah,
and that's the best way to get the maximum utility out of this operator is when you give it a little bit of time before people start getting used to it. I remember when quarantine was a very big thing, when like Lion was coming out in the pool, Ying. So it's nice to just give some teams a little bit of leeway, and then they worry about it whenever it comes available.
So stop complaining on Twitter.
Hey, for right now, just remember, this is the sort of thing that only really comes around whenever something like really needs to be addressed with an operator. Like to Fox's point, that was a thing. There used to be that big 3-month gap in between when an op came out and when you were actually able to use it in pro play. So at least for right now, just keep it in the back of your mind that at some point down the road we will see Scopos, just not right now. But a couple of things from Operation Twin Shells are immediately going to make an impact on our games today and going forward. The first of which being the fact that Dokkaebi is receiving a pretty significant change here.
This is such a huge change that Dokkaebi doesn't start with any calls. It actually takes 45 seconds since spawning in to get her first call, and then 45 seconds afterwards to get the next call. So it's so huge because a lot of teams rely a lot on Dokkaebi to be able to cut corners, clear without necessarily needing drones, and so getting rid of this call will affect tremendously how teams play on attack. Dokkaebi is a really big attack ban, so that also we could see Dokkaebi banned less, which will give her more play, so more opportunity to see those calls be used, but way later in those rounds.
Yeah, it's a pretty big nerf in my opinion, and obviously the 45 seconds to be able to make that first call is pretty pivotal, especially when you're taking space. But then on top of it, you can't go for quick one-offs, for a quick rush that you quickly identify where the team is. They aren't on site. You don't have Dokkaebi to get that information to solidify that round.
Dark Zero's bans for the longest time, literally for what feels like 2 years at this point, since Azami came out, was Dokkaebi Azami. Does this give DZ, or any team that Troy's on for that matter, the want to ban something different on attack now? Like, does this free that up?
Yeah, it'll definitely add a lot more flexibility to the bans because Dokkaebi, again, is for very aggressive teams that love to cut corners, so I could see it being banned way less.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think there's too much to touch up on that. It's definitely a very impactful nerf nonetheless, and I think that we will see maybe a little less dope than what we've seen previously.
Definitely the most significant change that we're seeing from any of the balance changes coming in with Twin Shells. The next one is a little bit more situational or interesting because it's with an op that hasn't seen nearly as much pro play over the past couple of months, and that's Nook. But not having the depletion of her ability unless you're on cams, that's the main factor in this case. That seems like a pretty significant change too.
Yeah, it's huge. It's going to bring Nock into the availability of playing a lot more. We saw her a year, 2 years ago being very pivotal vital in getting into positions fast. And then also they lowered the recoil on her FMG9 with the ACOG on it so that it's not bouncing so much when you're on it. So it's going to be so huge because you can walk around the whole map completely invisible, and until you're running or shooting, it's not going to deplete your energy bar at all. But once it does deplete your energy bar, you're going to see it's going to take a lot longer for it to charge up. So even though you don't lose it while you're moving, if somebody spots you and you got to run away and make a break for it, you got to remember that it takes a little bit longer now to replete all of it before you can use it again.
Yeah, and it's interesting, especially for the people who lurk, the people that like to, waste a lot of time and get around the map. I mean, this is going to be massive. I don't know how much of an impact we're going to see it on smaller maps, but a map like Bank that we notoriously saw her on. And then even sometimes like Oregon, obviously Oregon was out of the map, but you saw her come up through that basement. So I am curious now to see, especially that it only is activated once you start sprinting or shooting. Like, that is a very big change, but in terms of the utility that she brings, it's still very lackluster to an attack.
Back when she was more in the meta was when she had frag nades, which made her a very potent option. Since then, haven't seen her played nearly as much. Does the change like this now give incentive for more teams to want to bring her back into her lineups?
Absolutely. I mean, she was so pivotal on, like Lack said, big maps, theme park, Bank. So now that you can have it creeping through a whole area of the map, taking it for yourself, yes, she doesn't have the nades like she used to, but with the gun buff and the ability to creep all the way through, you can definitely see it in big exposed areas like Bank Garage. Maps like that you'll see her back in play, I think.
I can see it being very situational, for sure.
As if she kind of wasn't already situational where she sat in the meta right now. I guess that status won't necessarily change. Different for Solus, though, because, again, used to have a huge presence on defense, had the second part of her rework go into effect. Now, she's got even more limited usage of what her scanner is, and you don't know what you're seeing on the other side of that scanner at this point.
Yeah, and as a defender, obviously, that is a pretty big change, but to me, it's not, going to be, like, super crazy, because when you're already seeing this, typically, you're going to know where typical drone placements are, or where a Claymore
You figure you know what everyone there is.
Yeah, or, like, what an air jab is, or possibly where someone's going to be on a camera, so I don't see this being, like, super huge. Obviously, it's still nerf nonetheless, because you do have to waste the scan here to figure out what something is, but it's going to really elevate in terms of the player of trying to figure out when's the best time to use it, because now you actually get detected when you are within the range of the ability.
Yeah, and last stage when we saw her change, she was changed from that last layer of a defense denying plants from below. Now you have to be very impactful with her. You have to bring her for a roam, a flank, for a reason. And now with this change, it just makes her that much more important and difficult to play, so that you are using her for a specific reason. When you go for a flank, the communication value has to be there for your team. And the biggest change that I would notice is when you are on that Solus scanner and within range of a drone, you will get detection of Solus scanning your gadget. So now it just makes it a little bit more fair for the attackers to have an understanding that, hey, maybe that flank's coming, maybe your electronic is exposed, and maybe we can see a little bit of electronic being moved, move a Claymore last second, move a drone last minute. And it's just a little bit fairer of a back and forth against Solus.
There's a little bit more timing and another button press involved before she really has impact on the round, and in what is still a pretty heavily defender-sided meta, trying to even things out a little bit seems like it makes sense, but we'll see how it plays out in the server. And a couple of other balancing changes as they came through, one of them being after 9 years of drones functioning the exact same way as they have all the time, now they have a speed boost?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's going to be funny to kind of see someone try to shoot a drone when it's going, 500 miles per hour. Obviously, I'm exaggerating that. But it's going to be interesting.
To just see NASCAR races now.
And in terms of the drone phase, I mean, typically the prep phase is going to be the most important one here. Just being able to get into the map a lot faster and get in a secured spot, I definitely can see that being utilized, or even in the last couple of seconds to just get that boost, to get an initial 2 to 2 seconds to help you decide what you want to do can make a difference. But again, I think the biggest benefit from this is possibly in the prep phase.
Yeah, in tandem with the Solus change, getting pre-placed drones is where you're going to use this the most. Obviously, for example, Bank going up the red stairs, but a very big change was the Claymore. No delay, an instant explosion on triggering the Claymore. So I know everyone has their own little bit of experience jumping out, getting a kill, and not blowing up to the Claymore, or just getting out of range. So now you will just blow up as soon as you hit that trip, and I think it makes Claymores a lot better, because now you just see them getting taken out so easily.
And then the R4C losing 5 bullets and now sitting at 25 over 30.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a significant difference. I mean, yes, you are losing 5 bullets, but in a game where it's one-shot headshot, as long as you're hitting that head, I mean, you only really need 1 bullet out of a 25 magazine or a 30-round magazine.
My concern was with an R4C nerf, would that just mean losing the ACOG? But it didn't in this case. The one thing that happened was just that it had
the community would be in an uproar
bullets
if
out of
they
the
lost
mat. No,
ACOG after
I think they probably, Twitter would have absolutely been in an uproar, but that didn't happen. It just means what? It's a little bit less potent for Ashe, a little less potent for Ram. It is a big deal, though.
It's less ability to just be pre-firing every angle. You got to be a little more aware of your situation and where you're going to be wasting some of those bullets, but ultimately, it's still a one-shot headshot game. So as long as you can hit one of those bullets out of the 25-round magazine, that's the important bit.
So those changes from Twin Shells are coming up in all of the games from here on out. That's already had some impact in some of the other regions that have happened up until this play of the NAL has started. So we'll see specifically how North American teams react to those changes. And based on how Week 1 went, it's going to make things interesting because the standings through just the first 2 days are already starting to paint the picture for what the rest of playoffs might look like going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the top is definitely a big mix of what we expected everything to end up after Week 1. I think the biggest outliers are obviously LG, Los. We had them both at the bottom of our power rankings. They had a great Week 1, give and take. And so everything's just been extremely competitive so far after Week 1. It just makes me really excited to watch the rest of this season play out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it best. Our top line is definitely kind of what we saw. You saw Soniqs as first. I saw Space Station second. So at least we're both right in that regard. M80 sitting third. But yeah, Los and Luminosity are the biggest surprise here. You can kind of brush off Cloud9, Beast Coast, and Dark Zero only for the simple fact they played one game. But the Oxygen and Wildcard, that is the one that is worrisome for me, for especially Oxygen, because I need to be seeing results from both these teams nonetheless.
I want to do a double check on your boys' power rankings at some point in a couple of days. Not now, but once we get the idea on what some of these teams are really starting to dig themselves into strategy-wise, then we'll see whether it lines up with where you had them starting at the beginning of the stage and where they're at now at this point. I mean, the one constant being guys like Soniqs and M80 were up there on your boys' lists originally, and they're up there already. They had really, really good first weeks overall.
Yeah, and I guess the big wrench in our plans is Los and Luminosity. Like we said, they got some wins fast in the season. So now, especially with seeing OXG wildcard at the bottom, I mean, you never know who's going to be able to take a win from anybody. And those points, as the week goes on, it just makes it more and more dire for the teams at the bottom.
And it just goes to show how competitive this has been with only 2 days, and we still have a boatload of Siege left.
Dude, it's day 3. There's still so much more of this.
Feels like day 4 for me because I just did Brazil. Actually, we both just did Brazil, so it feels like I'm already on the 3rd week, but in reality, we're only on the 2nd.
We got Siege on the brain, man, and today's a really good slate of games, too. I feel like the first 2 days were fantastic. Today's got a couple bangers as well. M80 and Soniqs, the current #1 and #3 ranked teams, face off in the first game of the day, and then the matchup that has defined the NAL since before the NAL was a thing, Space Station and Dark Zero, game #2.
Yeah, M80 Soniqs, in my opinion, has the potential to be the game of the stage so far. Just both teams battling for that top echelon of teams, and so it's really nice to see that they're going to have a matchup so early on. I'm really excited for OXG Wildcard because we have the 2 best teams right now playing today, and we got the 2 worst teams playing today, so I'm excited to see both sides of the spectrum.
Truthfully, I'm looking forward to the Cloud9 Beast Coast versus Luminosity. Obviously, we touched up on them when they first lost that game against M80, as they looked like they should have won the game. It came down to little fundamentals that stopped them, so I am excited to see if they did shake off the rust, they did learn things different. And then for Luminosity, I mean, we had them at the bottom, but they are performing exceptionally well and getting better with every game, so I expect that game to be extremely close.
And just in case you were wondering, the Brazilians have the bye. Los won't play on 3. They will play tomorrow on 4, and someone else will get the bye in their stead. But it means that the rest of North America has the chance to move up or down the podium without wondering where the Brazilian team is going to factor into the equation. Unless you count M80, because there's still a couple Brazilians on that roster. So why don't we start with them? These guys have been getting off to a very hot start, both M80 and Soniqs. But now the question becomes, what do you do when you take 2 guys who both won a major on the same team together and put them on totally different teams years apart from when they last played? The last time we saw Canadian and Hyper in the same lobby at the same time was back in 2022. It's been a hot minute.
I think Hyper specifically said he's looking forward. Well, no, actually, that was to Dark Zero. Never mind. Scratch what I'm saying. But I think regardless, these are going to be 2 heads up. These rosters made significant changes. Obviously, one bringing on Hyper and the other bringing on Surf and Troy. I think this is really going to test the fundamentals of both these teams and a true testament to see who's really sitting at the top of the NAL currently.
Yeah, it's really nice to see, obviously, the previous DZ alumni, as you put it, Jacob.
Yeah.
Just finding success on their newer teams. And obviously, both teams have had very strong attack and defensive showing in week 1. Both teams are very neck and neck. One, I would say, is more strategical. One is more gun-orientated. So it's going to be a nice clash of kind of the old meta of Siege versus a new meta of Siege going forward.
And both of them have got really strong starts their first week. Both of them were 2-0, but someone's got to go down, and the other one is going to get a really nice boost going forward for the rest of the stage. Start with M80. They won 7-4 on Club on Friday against Wildcard to cap off a 5-point week. Strong start, but now we'd love to see them do something that isn't Clubhouse.
Of course, and this game is going to be M80's hardest strategical battle because the team has been step-by-step preparing for teams very well. And you can see that in the play where they're able to just play a little bit of slower pace Siege and a little bit of faster pace Siege. On a moment's notice, they're able to switch since picking up Hyper. They're just so cohesive all together, all playing in the right moments, and they just make things happen on the fly just like that.
And I agree with that. I mean, I want to definitely see a little more diverse map play. I hope that we don't see a Clubhouse today because, like I said, I don't think some of the teams that have played their maps twice now really have been tested to see what's changed, what's new, what they're going to bring. So I really hope going into today's match, especially with these two, that we do see a little more diversity in the map pool.
What specifically from M80 are we hoping to see more of? Was there something that really tightened up over those Clubhouse matches that we can take with us into other maps in the stage? What are we thinking for M80 right now?
I mean, it's their level of adaptability, and we have some clips to show you that they can take what we show in these clips going into their next set of maps, where in their first game against C9BC, you can see they played a very turtle-orientated defense. They stalled out C9BC. They knew they wanted to execute to be the go-to, so they waited. They made C9BC overextend. They forced them to plant. They get the kills around the plant. They're not worried about it because they know exactly how C9BC was going to attack. Once they get all of their kills cleaned up, yes, C9BC gets the plant down, but it doesn't really matter. Now, this game was on day 1. Play day 2, M80 plays against Wildcard. They've shown this strat. If you're Wildcard, you have prepared for this. What does M80 do? They decide to set up a fake roam to bait Wildcard into thinking that they've swapped it. So they're thinking forward into Wildcard thinking that they're going to swap it. They do a fake roam because they know Wildcard is a very slow-orientated team. So they're preparing match to match based off the teams that they're playing. They slow Wildcard down. Wildcard eats all of their own time up by trying to roam clear, and they inevitably lose in the same way going for that execute like C9BC did, but it's the middle and start that M80 held the tempo down all the way until those last couple of seconds, and they're showing you how to stall time based on the team that they're playing.
No, and I love the adaptation that you're talking about here because it's so important in Siege, and especially for the viewers here. Just changing one small thing already impacts a round tremendously, especially for an attacking half when you have to readjust. But when you're doing it at a bigger level and there is a lot more complexity to it, interrupting flow of comms is so tough, especially when you go into that round thinking that you already know what's going to happen, you're prepped for it, and then you immediately get met by something entirely different. That changes and shifts the dynamic of how you are approaching that game, and ultimately, like you saw, they stalled out, ended up losing that round.
And it already looks like the transition of having Hyper on the squad is paying dividends for this M80 team, where some people may have doubted that a guy who hadn't played a top flight competition for a hot minute, was he going to be the right add for this team? So far, through 2 Clubhouse games, it's worked out pretty well. For Soniqs, they only played Clubhouse 1 time over the course of last week, which, thank God, we saw enough of it just then. But they did win 7-2 on Skyscraper against Canadian's old team and put them to sleep without losing so much as an attack.
Yeah, and you know, we were curious to see how Soniqs were going to do, especially with these 2 new roster changes, and especially in that wildcard game. That was a very close game, and Fox touched up on it. That, you know, we were also curious to see how well Troy was going to transition into this roster and turn this roster into a winning team, and we saw that almost immediately, especially in those blitz changes. But then we go to the most recently of their last match against Dark Zero. It was a highly anticipated game. Unfortunately, it wasn't very high-octane gameplay. It was just one-sided. It was a 7-2. They looked beautiful, and that just goes back into what I was talking about, is how fast Troy was going to transition into this roster with Surf and make this roster even better, and they are doing a damn good job at showing it.
Right, the conversation's been on the 2 new guys for obvious reasons, but if there was anybody else you had to pinpoint, there's one superstar that already through just 2 games is emerging to going back to his old self, for lack of a better term.
And who is it, other than the rookie of Troy? It's Rexen. You have to talk about Rexen. I mean, we didn't get to talk about him a lot throughout last stage. Obviously, they didn't have a really good performance. We didn't see them at EWC, but he is back here. He is gunning for this roster. He is creating so much success, creating so many openings for this team, and he is such a pivotal player. We've talked about Swiss Army knives in terms of Hyper and stuff like that, but that's also Rexen. Rexen does so much for this roster, and I love that we're able to touch up on him and really just get an idea of what this roster is looking like, especially with the new iteration, but again, of their core players players of Grixer, of Rexen, of Ambi just performing extremely well.
And it's nice to see all of them just come a lot more into light and really close out these rounds based off of their performance since picking up Canadian, because he adds an element that they did not have in Stage 1. Stage 1, all of the Soniqs players were playing very well, performing very well individually. But the issue is when it came down to the end, they all had to use their brain. What's going to go on? What's going to happen? Now they got Canadian. Now they don't need to use as much brain capacity in those last final minutes. They just have their gun up and they do their job.
And here you are. These are the top 10 standings. Obviously, these are only 2 days. This can easily fluctuate, but the fact that Rexen is coming out of the gate here, swinging, heavy-handed, and putting himself at the top, and then, you know, we just recently touched up on Serp. He is at the bottom at the top 10. Still, obviously, at the end of a top 10 out of 45 players, this is still looking extremely good for Soniqs going into this matchup.
Yeah, Soniqs have had the pieces of a really cohesive championship-winning team for a while now, but we talked to the dude who had everything to do coming into a brand new team this stage. We caught up with Canadian before the stage started to get his thoughts on Stage 2.
Name is Troy Jaroslawski. I go by Canadian in-game, and I'm the in-game leader for the Soniqs. I just got dropped from DC just after the end of EWC. As soon as I found out about that, I approached a bunch of different teams just to kind of explore my options. There was a lot of interest across the board, and I just kind of took my time, thought things out, and just got a feel for where I wanted to go. What makes Soniqs unique from other teams in the NAL is not only the talent on the roster, I think it's probably on paper probably the best natural mix of playstyles that all mix well together and just complement one another in that sense. We picked up on things very quickly. I think there was almost a very natural chemistry between the players. For me, it's very good to call with because we have the tools to kind of go in whatever direction we want. As an IGL, I think that's very, very dangerous to have. Right away, everyone really kind of bought in culture-wise and attitude-wise, mentality. I think everyone's on the same page in terms of the effort and expectations of one another and of ourselves. I think the obvious answer for the rival question is DZ. I think there's always kind of been a Soniqs DZ rivalry when I was on DZ. I think there's obviously going to kind of be one now with DZ replacing me and me moving here. So contenders to win NAL, I'd say ourselves, Beast Coast, and SSG. Beast Coast has a good understanding of how they want to play the game, and I think SSG, they also have the playstyle strength, but I think it's a little mismatched. But I think their culture and their work ethic is something that kind of puts them up there. I think our goals, it's just making sure we feel like we gave everything we had, we put in all the time to get our strats up to date, we put in the effort in practice, didn't waste days having bad attitudes in practice. I want to prove people wrong. I think we all 100% think that we can be the best team in NA, no problem, and even the best team in the world.
Being able to turn team culture around is a huge plus for a team that had an IGL and a Fragger come in at the exact same time. For Canadian and Soniqs to have the sort of result through the first week that they did is fantastic. The big question now is how long can they ride that hot streak, or would they keep this thing going for?
I hope pretty long because, like Troy said, everyone really bought into the system. And I would imagine that the earlier weeks since getting Canadian would be the most difficult because the more time that you give this experienced roster to get comfortable to Canadian style of IGLing, the better they're going to get, the more their arsenal is going to be. And like Canadian said, he's got every little bit of what he needs out of his teammates. And when you have every possibility, every option that you could possibly have, it makes it that much easier to call, and it makes you a very dangerous team to play against.
It also creates so many different avenues and approaches to Siege that you can easily flip the switch whenever you need that, and especially with Troy's mastermind set to be able to put that in motion. I mean, I'm expecting a lot from the Soniqs roster, and so far, I'm really liking what we've been seeing.
Just a question of whether Club is on the docket. It made it all the way to the last 3 maps in the pool. Do we see it again?
I hope not. I hope
might.
not. I don't think
getting close.
I don't think Soniqs would take them to Clubhouse.
Soniqs are good at Clubhouse, though, so
They are, but...
Ooh, very, very end. We get Labs instead.
See, I was right. Soniqs wouldn't take him to Clubhouse. They left it up all the way into the end.
Kind of a bluff game to see who does it or who doesn't at that point.
Yeah, I think if you're Soniqs, obviously, and you're watching M80's best maps, yes, you have footage on what they can do on Clubhouse, but why go there when you can go to a map that nobody has footage on Soniqs for, bring them to a whole different variable of maps, and when we see a situation like this happen, it's really up to the IGLs, to the calling, to the team who's able to make the better adaptation first. And so it's nice to see that it's going to go to a map where it's going to contest both sides of the IGL coin.
No, I think that's the best. I think this is the best case scenarios for both these teams, and especially more so Sonic specifically, is that this map is really going to come down to your IGL and having everyone pivot. And like I was talking about, having everyone be able to be on this roster to move around, situate them, and have Troy be able to facilitate that. I mean, this is going to be a really testament to M80's ability to be able to adapt, to be able to understand what's happening inside the game and make any adjustments that are needed throughout the match.
Yeah, and it really comes down to those attacks. Last week, we saw Los beat OXG off of those attacks.
Legacy specifically.
Nighthaven is a very big attack-oriented, well, it's a very big defender map, but if you can get those attacks nailed down shut early on, it's going to pay dividends to the rest of the map.
Stop predictions real quick. Fox, I think you were totally undefeated through every pick in week 1. Is that true?
Yeah, it was 100%. I even got the upset of Los OXG, so I mean, hopefully my predictions this week, still get 100% by the end of the week. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I got to go with Soniqs here just for the simple fact of everything that we just talked about. I just don't think M80 is going to have what it takes to get in that tank of, understanding what you need to do. But again, hey, I can be entirely wrong. I like being proven wrong. Obviously, Fox doesn't because he's 100% so far. But nonetheless, I think all in all, this game is going to be really close. But just for the simple fact and the fundamentals and how this game is going to be played and with the IGLs in it, I got to go with Soniqs.
Sonic start on defense first. Does that do anything to help sway your thoughts on how this one might go?
Yeah, I definitely would have thought M80 would have won going into this, but seeing the map, especially with Sonic starting first, I just don't know if M80 is going to have enough in them to get that many attack rounds. I think the deficit will be so far gone by the time the sides swap that Sonics will just be able to clean it up once they swap.
I agree. There's not much to say. I just want to get into this and really see these two guys battle it out.
I think I did a little, just a little bit of Liquipedia surfing, just in my free time, as I do, as an absolute nerd. And I found out that every time a team starts a stage 0-3, every time, they go on to make playoffs. It's a guarantee. If it's 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, no matter what it is, so long as you win your first 3 games, you get to playoffs. It isn't a guarantee for the major, but it does mean that if you at least cross that threshold, so far since the NAL has had playoffs, nobody's fallen off that wagon. So we're collectively saying Sonics are going to be the first team to do that.
I mean, I was about to say, so what you're saying is Sonics are going to be the first ones to be making playoffs here is basically what you're saying.
I mean, if they win the map.
I think both these teams are going to be in playoffs. I'll just say that right now. Both these teams will 100% be in playoffs.
All right, bold move.
Sometimes it's a double-edged sword. The more you win, you get closer, you get comfortable in that first top 2 spot, and then the later games come in and you're like, well, we got 3 points left, we got 2 points left, and then you just slowly sink towards the middle of the bracket.
Right.
So it's just, you obviously want to maintain that top 2 spot, but there's so many games to go forward.
Well, going 3-0 certainly sets you on the right path. Again, not a guarantee for the major, but if you were to go 3-0 to start your stage, then you're looking really, really hot for playoffs. Who's going to be the first team to get to 3-0? The Canucks in the booth will tell us.
Thank you very much. Not only Canucks in the booth, but also Troy going to Sonics, and they play Nighthaven Labs. What a shocker. He loved this when he was on Dark Zero. Did you not do a TikTok or something like that about...
I did a whole video. I did a whole video about who the GOAT of Nighthaven Labs is, and my conclusion. My conclusion was it's kind of up in the air. I think DZ. Yeah, it was like it was like a 45-minute video.
What was your conclusion? I did not have a conclusion. There was none.
Dark Zero have historically been the best team on Nighthaven. They haven't lost it in a really long time. But the problem is DZ haven't, by chance, come up against a lot of the other top Nighthaven teams in recent memory. They do play Beast Coast every now and again. Beast Coast are in conversation for best Nighthaven team. FaZe kind of were in conversation, but they're not really in that combo anymore. But obviously with roster moves, that's going to be a big shakeup. We already saw the difference from Dark Zero on Playday number 2 when they came in without Canadian, and they looked absolutely dreadful, losing their first map to the Sonics. So who knows if that'll shake up. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the season to maybe find out. For Sonics and M80, I feel that Sonics have always been like a solid Nighthaven team. They've never been the best, but they've always been happy to play it. Typically, they'll like ban it against the teams that are like the GOATs at Nighthaven, like DZ and FaZe, and then they'll be willing to play it against pretty much anybody else. And M80, I think they have like a lot fewer plays overall. It's been It's been a bit of a map that they've gone to every now and again, but not one that they've had to play a ton. They actually won it twice last stage. Here we go. They beat Oxygen and they beat Liquid. So again, historically not the greatest labs teams, but good labs teams as well. Liquid in particular do like that map quite a bit. So this should be a really fun game. Soniqs have been looking excellent so far this stage, and I'm hoping to see that continue.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big talk of the NAL was Troy moving off of DZ to Soniqs. I think that's fair to say was the dominant story for the North American League as we came into the second stage here. And they have lived up to the billing that a lot of people kind of put them in. You know, that's Troy in a New Jersey. It's so odd to see that because his runs with teams tend to be, you know, quite a long time. So I imagine that he'll settle in on Soniqs. And again, you and I had the Soniqs matchup against Wildcard to start off the stage last week. And the one thing that we talked about was how good of a mind Super is when it comes to Rainbow Six Siege. And obviously he was in a general managerial role, not coaching the team directly. That was Goddess's job, assisted by Joe Bro as one of the support staff for the Soniqs. And of course, excellent minds of the game, but having Super I don't want to say step down from general manager into coaching, because I don't necessarily agree that a coach is a step below general manager, but having Super step right into this fray, a great mind of the game. And then you add somebody like Troy, who maybe his mechanical ability has come under fire recently, but not so much his strategic ability. That's a great 1-2 punch for SQ. On the side of M80, they picked up Hyper. There was a lot of talk about Hyper stepping back into active play, and they had a bit of a scare against the defending major champions on that very first day, but then it was all steam ahead against Wildcard on that second day. Now, of course, they're going to have their hands full. Do they knock off SQ, who are currently undefeated? Do we see M80 continue to develop as they adjust to a new player on the roster? Obviously, Noodle was moved off and Hyper was brought in, and they play differently in the way that even if their roles might be the same, they're just different players. It'll be fascinating to watch in this matchup. And obviously, it's very common for us to say, yeah, well, we don't know who's going to do what, and we don't know how a team is going to do. But I genuinely, Jesse, have no idea how this matchup is going to go.
No, neither do I. I think Soniqs have played better through week one. M80 certainly made some blunders, especially in their opening game against Cloud9 Beast Coast. I don't think they would deny that. But these are two world-class teams. These are two teams we expect to be fighting for major spots and then heading to that major and then maybe making deep runs in those majors as well. I'm really glad you brought up both Hyper and Canadian, because while newer viewers may not be aware, long-term viewers will know that Hyper and Canadian were on a team together for over a year, not too long ago on Dark Zero, before Hyper ended up retiring for a short bit. Won a major together, have a lot of that history, so I'm really excited to see if those two end up clashing at all on the server. Most people would agree that when it comes to mechanics and individual gun skill, Hyper has probably got the edge over Canadian, but of course, Canadian's edge has always been his guns, or his eye-gelling ability and his calling.
Who in their right mind, Jesse J. Chick, is going to turn around and say, you know what, in a pure 1v1 gunfight, I've got Canadian over Hyper? Because I would love to just like talk to that person and follow them around for a day just to see what kind of trouble they get up to.
Maybe I've got the argument, okay?
Okay.
Hyper has so much respect for his former IGL that as soon as he sees him in the server, he starts shaking. He gets so nervous about what Canadian's going to think of him in this game. They haven't played a match. They haven't played in the same server in so many years. So Hyper shakes, and then he goes like 0-9, and Canadian goes in all chat, and he's like, haha, I own you.
I too can write fan fiction, Jesse. I am capable of that as well. Pardon the delay, by the way. We're just getting everybody into the lobby. As you can see, the various players from M80 all milling about. I think it's quite clever now that they've rebranded that all of the jerseys have an 80 on the back. Usually in traditional sports, you put the numbers on the back so it's easy to identify them. But when gamers are sitting in chairs, you never see the number on the back of the jersey. I always kind of wondered what the thought process was there other than just imitating traditional sports. So, I mean, you can use that space to sell ads and sponsorships, which also won't be seen because, well, the chair is there. But clever to M80, Citizen also with a webcam. This week, we didn't see that the previous week. If you watched our second day of the NAL, you witnessed the Grixer clutch to save the round and win the game for Soniqs on Skyscraper. This was just about 5 days ago, give or take. And it was against Dark Zero of all teams. And what a clutch that was. Troy getting his revenge immediately on the team that dropped him by prevailing 7-2. But that clutch, Jesse, were you co-streaming the event? Because I did not see your reaction, but when I watched it, I laughed. That was my reaction.
I did. I had a pretty good clip of it, actually. I was screaming, no, not like this, and then it came down just like that. So it was certainly a fun game. It wasn't a close game between Soniqs and Dark Zero, but hopefully this one can be a little bit closer, as it does look like we're finally loading on in, and we jump to the operator bans. It will be Dokkaebi. That was probably the hardest ban to predict. I'm expecting after this to see Monty, Tubarão, Azami. Whether Soniqs would keep wanting to ban Doke after her nerf was my big question. I thought maybe they could ban Ying instead. Oh, M80 with an ace ban. We're going to have both Canadian and Kino up with the Montaigne on Nighthaven Labs, map where Monty can be very, very strong and be clearly not too happy about the ace ban. There's the Tubarão that I expected. I'm thinking the Azami will come next. Could go something like a Valk if they really want to. Maybe a Mira. Mira's pretty good on this map as well, but I think the Azami, especially for DZ, will come, or sorry, not for DZ, oh boy. For Soniqs, for Troy's team, will be the expected pick to come on out. So the ace ban, the most interesting one for me there, that's going to maybe impact how Ambi's able to play this game.
Yeah, it's also quite striking that we don't get any shield ban whatsoever. I mean, how many games in a row have we personally, you and I, witnessed shield ban, blitz ban, Monty ban, either way? And then obviously you had that goofy double Monty blitz ban, and then you saw Forrest immediately go on fuse shield, and you wonder what on earth is happening in the server. But anywho, one thing that people will need to note is that we obviously have released the newest season. Well, we haven't, we don't work for Ubisoft, but the game has. Which means that there have been a wide range of changes to certain operators, certain abilities. There is a new operator in the game, but she and her robots are currently quarantined, so we're not going to see them. But obviously keep in mind that those changes, which were talked about by the desk earlier during the pre-show, Dokkaebi in particular, but also change to Solus coming in, will impact the way that teams go about this. And obviously with the NAL starting on a different patch, it will require teams to be a little bit light-footed and quick to make some changes and adapt to it. Either way, we get underway in our very first defense for Soniqs. And as you can see, quite an extended roam setup. It is a top floor defense, but they will be guarding that first floor with their lives.
A quick note on the ace ban as well, because I just looked up a statistic for it really quick. Rexon was the undisputed greatest player from week 1 in the NAL. He was so good. He picked ace in over half of his attacking rounds. So that's actually going to be a target ban focusing in towards Rexon. I think that that's going to be something that he might have to work around. Won't see it till round 7 if it does come out, but I just wanted to mention that was a dedicated target ban coming out against what has so far been the MVP of the North American League. For now, though, we are heading to the top floor. We saw some interesting Mira setups coming out from Surf. They've got one inside of the Aqua hallway facing into the bomb site. A little bit dangerous, maybe, because the attackers could take advantage of that if they choose to push over by Aqua. But for now, it will be a Mira window that the defense have control over. They've got another one that puts here into Rafters, and it's Kino on the Monty. We talked about how he'd be playing this operator a lot. It's his favorite op to play. He can be very good at it, despite sometimes what the memes will have you believe. He does really enjoy this operator. So excited to see how it goes for him. We've got IT wall open really, really quick. Raptors control really quick. They can counter the Mira window fast here. As far as time is concerned, I'm really happy with M80 so far. Now they can choose, do they want awkward, do they want connector? But whichever choice they make, they're in a really good spot to set up and go for a good execute.
Halfway point of the round, that was Rafters control also being held. It's a good thing that I don't work with Nick anymore, because the noises that Nick would be making just based on the immediate Monty play by Kino, well, you know, you're going to be a little bit nicer to Kino, I feel like. Maybe. Bring that nice old-fashioned Canadian politeness where we're not actually that polite. We're just not immediately rude, I suppose. Kino asserting himself, though, droned on in as the shield will get ever closer to the bomb site. Nobody from Soniqs right now really holding that far away from the actual sites. They can coalesce with 45 seconds left in the round and just hunker down and wait for M80 to bring the fight their way.
Yeah, where's the plant going down? That's my question, because Kino currently has Diffuse Kit. It looks like he kind of wants to go Rafters, could then plant on maybe the reinforced wall that goes between the two bomb sites. That seems to be the situation. Right there is where he wants to plant, but of course, they need full control of the A site as the flashes come out.
He's in. There goes a Nitro Cell. Hyper, done and dusted by Canadian. Maybe there is something to what you were saying. Of course, it wasn't a direct gunfight, but still. Canadian eliminating Hyper. Former teammates, they won a major together. And it's Canadian getting the last laugh. Rex did him with one, a Nitro Cell from Surf. All 3 kills from Soniqs from different players. Kino on the board. Grixer in on the action. Ambi, you're up for the final kill, and it's a team ace for Soniqs to start off the match.
The yup comes out, and absolutely, we see a super solid defense from the Soniqs. We're very ready for it. The C4 coming out from down below, that's an area of the map that M80 did not control whatsoever. We see a lot of that coming out from Soniqs. Really good hold coming out there. For M80, it's the first round. It's Nighthaven. It's a defender-sided map, so I'm not too concerned. The opening pick with Canadian onto Hyper. Maybe, when we're being a little bit more serious, that is how Canadian's going to get the best over Hyper. That's how he's going to come out and win that 1v1 duel if they keep having it against one another. So I don't think it was a bad push by M80. They had everything open that they wanted to. Just couldn't find the frags as they went on in. Bad start, of course. So not too concerning. We're still shaping up to have a strong game. We may be rehosting here, just depending on how this ends up going. But in any case, I'm happy for Soniqs. I think we're shaping up really to have a good start to this series.
Just waiting, and yep, it looks like a rehost will indeed be happening. So a bit of a reprieve and a breather for these teams as they fought. Oh, they were in the server for a whole 3 minutes. They must be exhausted, Jesse.
Parker, I was watching, I decided last night I was going to co-stream the LATAM region because Flynn always asked me to co-stream. That's the region that he casts primarily. And he said, Jesse, you've got to co-stream the LATAM region. So I said, okay, Flynn, I'm going to do it. I'm going to co-stream LATAM. There was no other games going on yesterday in the North American time zone. I think there was MENA and some APAC games maybe. But I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. We got through halfway of the first round, and then after that, there was a 75-minute tech pause. Not even one round into the game. So I'm glad that at least in North America, we can get one round checked off the box. We're doing better than some of the other regions in Siege. And I'm also expecting that this tech pause will be a little bit quicker than the one that we saw in LATAM the other night, because that was certainly something to try to co-stream through. Let me tell you that.
I mean, I don't need to say this for myself, but everybody else watching is that, we hope it's not 75 minutes, but we're going to go to a break and we'll come back when the issue has been resolved. Sit tight. We are back. Soniqs taking the very first round, and then everything broke. So we have returned now. And while there's still plenty of time for M80 to make some operator swaps, we might just have another shield on the board. Not our first, though, because we saw Monty in round number 1, but Kino holding on to the blitz for the time being.
Yeah, in week 1, Kino played not actually that many shields. He played 2 rounds on Blitz, 1 round on Monty out of the 12 total attacking rounds that they played. So I do expect him to switch off the operator at some point, off the 2 operators, I should say, at some point during this game, but it won't be in the first 2 rounds because he did end up locking down that Blitz. I'm looking at this operator lineup, Parker. I am seeing a Ying, I'm seeing a Lion, I'm seeing a Blitz. This, to me, speaks that it's going to be a very explosive execute. Now, it might not be a rush, per se. We are in the basement. Based on current positioning, it looks like they are going to try to get a couple of picks. Great drone from Spoit up on this top floor before they go for anything crazy. I'm really excited to see what Citizen can do with these Candelas because they've got really good drones. They might be able to clear somebody and isolate them out with a free early pick on the side of M80.
You don't have access to the expanded cards in the UI, by the way, for those wondering. So we'll be doing it old school. And they're off to the races. Surf starting things off. Down goes Kino. Citizen will follow. We're on board Spoit as he now makes his way down ever closer to the bomb site, but his position has been given away. Down goes Hyper to Canadian. Surf dies. Canadian killing Hyper 2 rounds in a row, by the way. That might not have been on somebody else's bingo card. It's all up to Spoit and Cameraman, and Cameraman's been working away at blowtorching one of the walls downstairs in the site. But I mean, it's just the 2 of you in a 2v4 with half the round still to go. Soniqs for another round will sit in a very good position.
Yeah, things didn't really go to plan this round for M80. Now they're stuck in a 2v4. They could isolate Ambi. He's got the hatch to back off if he wants to. He'll be getting into this gunfight with Spoits, not a player you ever want to find yourself in a 1v1 with. He has a teammate over by Electrical, but Spoit will change angles. He's caught on the default cam and now struggling to hit these shots to find Ambi before this player gets away. Every second that ticks down, things get worse and worse for the Soniqs, of course, for M80, I should say. Trying to bait a swing, but he just can't find it. He'll rotate angles now, still unable to find that frag. Now Cameraman comes on over, but the utility is blocking him from finding a pinch angle. The best he can do is also come over to Rafters and try to help Spoit here. At any point, Ambi can just leave as well, drop the hatch, decide his life is more valuable. But for now, he still feels like it's worth it to gamble, and it will pay off with one. Can he get both? Yes, sir. Ambi, the youngest player on the Sonics, stepping up big time in the end of the round.
Huge play. I saw on Twitter last week after that play where Grixer clutched it out. I think it was Yardy tweeted something like, Ambi finally had a good game for the first time in his career or something along those lines. And I mean, whether it's a testament to role changes, whether it's Canadians' impact right away, there's some frustration there for M80 Cameraman letting it spill over on camera as there's quite a lot of relief from the players on SQ and very nearly a team ace again. I think the only person to not get a kill that time was Grixer. Surf got one, Canadian got one, Ambi got two. It was Rexon to get one. Yes, that's correct. So, and it was, as far as we saw, we didn't get access to the scoreboard right as the rehost hit, but the display names in the top right were that of a team ace in round number one. Every single player of Soniqs getting a kill. And for those checking at home, while the score right now says 0-1 and 1-0 and all that stuff, there was a one round played that we don't have the stats for. Canadian has killed Hyper in both rounds so far. So while I made some jokes in the lead up to this matchup saying, well, Canadian clearly can't out-aim a player like Hyper, no sane person would ever say that. It is currently coming true as Canadian is 2-0 over his former teammate. Hyper obviously still has some rust to shake off as it's been quite a while since he played at tier 1, but honestly doesn't look a step behind as some would fear. Third round now underway. Soniqs flawless so far and looking to go perfect in this rotation. All they need is a victory in this round and they got it. 3-0 lead would be quite nice for the team in teal.
Yeah, I'm not inherently too concerned by a 2-0 start on defense, but I am concerned with the way that these rounds have gone. They've been very dominant. SQ winning both opening picks so far. From M80, if you look at the stats of both Citizen and Spoit, they went together 9-0 on entry on attack in week one. Neither of them have been involved in an entry fight so far in this game. If they get involved, perhaps we'll see the early round shifting tides a little bit. Perhaps M80 can come out on top, but it really feels like Soniqs are shutting down these pushes as soon as they begin. M80 cannot really get started in a lot of these rounds. The setup is fine. They don't get over aggressive. They don't find early picks. When they actually jump in and try to make a move, it has been Soniqs shutting them down every single time. Now we're up here on the top, on the storage bomb site, I should say. They've got a bit of a way through the IT wall. They can at least hold it. That's really all they need. They just need to deny defender positions in there. They will be clearing out some of this top floor. Will they be clearing out all of it with the Monty? They certainly could, but I do question it because they're not going to need all of this space necessarily. Once they have control of these two rooms here that were just the bomb site in the last round, they will have enough to go for an execute.
3 rounds in a row of shields for Kino. Can't say he's really had much success so far. The new look of that Solus receiving some changes in the most recent patch. Nerfs, many would say. I would be inclined to agree with that. I don't know if Solus needed more nerfs, but I'm not a developer or a balancer. So I have, or any of those things. So I genuinely have no idea. No idea if they were necessary. But Ambi will be harassed at full HP, and there really isn't a lot of follow-up. Oh God, run, Ambi! You're down. Kino starting things off in round number 3, but there's still only 30 seconds left. A very small time for M80 to gain a lead, and Kino loses all but 5 HP in the process.
He's in an awkward spot for sure. Grixer gets tagged on the window too. Pressure from up above and the flashbangs come out. He's in a bad spot here, Parker. Really struggling inside the bomb site. Would love to be on Warden, but he's Castle instead. Citizen ups up one for Grixer, finally taking him down. And now it's a 2-man lead for M80, but only 10 seconds.
Spoit is very worried about the vault on in. There's a bulletproof camera as well that might have information. And there we go. Spoit hopping on in. Kino getting diffuser down. Rexon on the board. Cameraman with 1. 3 players from M80 on the board so far. There's a nitro cell, and it actually works. Canadian wins the round with the toss. My goodness. Almost every member of Soniqs on that main floor had been swept away, but there was one down below, unaccounted for, and Canadian on Pulse, an operator he's been playing for almost a decade, gets the job done. A perfect rotation is to be had, and it appears that M80 has called their timeout after falling behind 0-3 to start this match.
That was tragic for M80, man. They had him on the pulse scanner. They had the plant spot from Kino. Kino got off and changed his plant position, knowing that there was a pulse down below, knowing that he was only on 5 HP. He was going to be very vulnerable to the C4s. Canadian, I'm pretty sure that's not what he wanted to do with the C4. He didn't hit the ceiling initially. It went really far, and then it still was able to tickle 5 damage onto Kino and take him down, stopping the disable. Man, or the defuse, I should say. What a round from Soniqs. That was unfortunate for M80. I liked the way they played that early round. The shield play from Kino was good enough to clear all of top floor, but it wasn't then good enough afterwards to continue to close it out. I really did like the way that we saw Soniqs playing that from down below. A lot of Nighthaven teams, and I don't know why, but it's internationally especially, a lot of teams won't put anyone in the basement. I know Beast Coast really like putting players in the basement. Dark Zero have done it. It's not a new tactic by any means, but holding the basement is so strong because all of that storage site, the easiest site to execute on, is soft, and you can always deny plant from below down there. We've seen Solaces, we've seen Pulses, and of course both those being utilized now from the Soniqs. Really like that hold. The basement wasn't addressed at all from M80. That meant that they kind of had to plant on the other bomb site, but whether they just didn't have enough time to do that, whether they didn't have enough control, they chose to try to plant inside of storage instead, and that did not go their way. So, as you said, 3-0 for the Soniqs. A perfect first quarter. They will win every site that they have to. Kitchen cafeteria is available for them if they want to try it, but I see no need given how successful the other 3 bomb sites were. The first 2 rounds, extremely dominant. Soniqs looked in control the whole time. The third one, not quite the same, a little shaky, but the comeback and the play from down below, the objective denial was perfect.
Really don't love that you're trying to make this quarter of a match thing happen. I'm not in favor of it. I wasn't in favor of it last week. Nothing has changed.
Why?
What do you mean why? Because the actual match is broken up into halves. There's no quarters.
Okay, what's half
here.
half?
I know what half of half is. It's a quarter. I'm aware of how fractions work. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that math-wise you're wrong. I'm saying that theory-wise, I don't like it. You don't need to talk about the game like that.
It makes sense because it's one rotation, right? One quarter if the defense is doing what they have to. They go through each site once in a quarter. Plus, it's helpful in talking about the Element 3 tournament that happened over the summer where they did play with quarters, where the side would swap every 3 rounds instead of every 6. It was an interesting change. I heard some positive feedback, some negative. Obviously not being implemented right now into Tier 1 play, but it's certainly an interesting idea being tried out with Element 3. I really enjoyed seeing that shakeup over the summer.
Not really sure what our tech pause is right now. We had a tactical timeout that was called by M80 so they could try to right this proverbial ship that is adrift at the moment. Now there is a tech pause happening, and while players are able, I guess, to chat, maybe, I'm not sure if the rules have changed, but we are getting everybody back into the lobby and should be live momentarily. Sounds like we might be readying to go to yet another break, Jesse, but just waiting on the call from production.
If anything, if we do get a bit of a break, it might be kind of nice for M80. You're never hoping for tech pauses, but it might be nice for them to try to reset because this has been such a struggling map for them so far. But it does seem like we are ready to throw it to a quick break. So as soon as this is done, we will be back at you with the action. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon with round number 4 of M80 versus Soniqs.
We are back, Jesse, for our fourth round. We are a quarter of the way through this matchup, which is halfway to the halfway mark. Isn't that exciting?
That is fractions. Woo!
You're the math guy, not me.
Of course, that means we're back on the top floor of bomb site. The best thing about round number 4 for the defense is they get to play their primary site once again, assuming they won it in the very first round. And so we're back here on the top floor. And it looks like the strategy from M80 is not going to change too drastically. They still have Kino bringing up on the Monty. They don't have a ton of hard breach. They've got 2 can openers being held, I would guess, by the Montaigne, and then also the Maverick as well. So definitely will be enough to get that IT wall open. If they're going for connector as well, they could get it done. Might not be the easiest, might not be the smoothest, but it's certainly very doable. So we'll see what the push ends up being. It will again be an early entry from Kino inside of bottom garage. Last time, they just kind of let him exist up here. They didn't pressure too hard. Canadian is below and could go for a flank, but I think he values his life a little bit more playing alongside with the C4 and going for a late round flank rather than trying to apply pressure to Kino right off the bat.
Canadian's been really effective in the latter portion of these rounds. I mean, he just won the round that transpired about 5-ish to 10-ish minutes ago before we went on that break. So keeping him in these safer, more sheltered roles, never a bad thing. That said, he's going to be playing mute. Likely has access to a nitro cell. Unfortunately, we are not capable of seeing that, but if he's got any plant denying utility, then obviously him lasting till the end of the round is paramount. 4 rounds in a row from Kino on shields. As for operator lineups, nothing really that weird beyond that, but Nook did receive some changes, so she's a very different operator. It'll be fascinating to watch how Citizen plays her.
Yeah, Nook has probably gotten the biggest buff in the new season. You can theoretically be invisible to cams forever the entire round. The desk went over the specific changes right before the game started. You see the cam is on Citizen right now. They just look, but they can't find him. They've got really good drones inside the bottom floor as well. They're hunting for Canadian. His C4 got that critical opening pick at the very start. Surf is actually down there as well. I don't know if you saw him. He's above. But there are some really impactful plays that can come out from these C4s if they can hunt down Canadian and maybe deal with Surf on these aqua stairs as well. They could be in a really good spot.
M80 looking to strike first as they did in the previous round. They did end up winning that round largely because of objective play, or rather a lack of control over the objective play. There's Gumines being hit alongside an Adrenal Surge, and M80 looking for some kind of opening. The only damage that's been done to Soniqs is about half of Rexon's HP. 2 kills very quickly from M80, both in the hands of Cameraman. Canadian on the board, kills Citizen. That's the Nook spotted out. It's Canadian and Surf remaining. Now it's just up to Canadian as all of his teammates have died. A 1v4 with way too much time to try and deny this plant. He'll have to find Kino as he now ascends to the top of Fish Stairs. Spoit is ready, armed and willing. M80 finally on the board in round number 4.
Finally, we get some opening pick action from M80. Loved the way that they aggressed with Cameraman in through Electrical to find 2 quick kills, taking down Rexon and Grixer. Ambi being down right at that same moment as well. Really good play from the Maverick play of Cameraman to come on in through Electrical. And sometimes it's those swings that can really just change around one way or another. Canadian down in the basement where he often is, not able to have impact this time. Not only were they super aware of where he was, but they also were able to kill all 4 anchors before Canadian was even able to come back to the bomb site. So great response from M80. A lot of it came off with some good flashes and some good gunplay from Cameraman, which really got them started. You can see he's now 3-1 since the last couple of rounds. So he's been really fantastic for M80, was the MVP in my mind in that round. And we start to see some life out of M80. It looked like this game was starting to slip away. 3-0 is never a scoreline that you like to see. But with that round win, they're back up on the board.
Yeah, I mean, the rotation goes obviously in favor of Soniqs, and a 3-0 start is excellent because it means that you can't lose the first half. The worst Soniqs can do now is lose the next 2, and the first half goes 3-3 where both teams are relatively even. On a map like Nighthaven Labs, that's fine because this tends to be a very 50-50 map. By and large, most of the maps, if not all of the maps, currently in the map pool skew towards the defenders. They have a winning percentage on most of the bomb sites. That means the attackers have their work cut out for them. Nighthaven Labs often bucks that trend, though, And 3-3 first halves are not uncommon by any stretch of the imagination. However, it's up to M80 to get there, as Soniqs could very easily turn this one around given the success they've had on 3 separate bomb sites and prevail 5-1. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, though. We're just a little bit a ways into the action with still plenty of time left for both of these teams to figure out and execute onto this basement bomb site.
It's a 4-man roam centered around Canadian's Valkyrie cameras and how much they can do. DZ used to do something very similar to this when Canadian was on the roster, so I'm sure he's had a bit of an impact on this strategy. Very heavy roam setup, of course. 2 players top floor, 2 players mid floor. M80 don't seem to really be engaging with it much. They know that these roamers are up here. It's not a miss drone. It's not a mistake. They're just tactically deciding that they don't need much map control. And based on their current positioning, it seems like they might be wanting to finish inside of Animus and inside of Cargo. If they get inside a garage, they can drop the Animus hatch, watch it from outside the building, then try to get a plant down from that position. They've also done some breaching, of course, here on the assembly wall. So that'll do some help for them. If they want to plant from that, we'll have to wait and see. But typically, especially if you're not going for a heavy smoke strategy, that Animus-style plant inside of tank will be a little bit more favored, and that is now where Kino is. So this is going to be the problem that Soniqs have to face. It's a very strong execute, but they have a lot of roamers that can come back from a flank and a cheeky position from Surf.
And he reads one, but he can't do enough damage. Lighting up Citizen. Rexon finishes that one off. A good bit of coordination with both of these teams, and now Rexon needs to be worried about IT wall, where Cameraman could have met his demise. Now it's Surf lined up, watching that breach again to do some more damage. M80 have to find an entry point and maybe a kill as they get towards the 45-second mark.
Surf's in a really power position, though. He can deny the plant from playing inside of Cargo. They know that he's here. They know they have to deal with him. But as the firebolts come out, they still don't have the kill. There's a big one from Kino.
Not on a shield. This time playing the recruit of Striker, and strike first he will for M80. Hyper now. A big kill onto Surf. This boy picked up by Rexon. They're going to trade back and forth. As long as this continues, Soniqs will be in great shape, especially with the time being what it is. Kino still on plant duty, though. Has case in hand. Manages to get it down. Hyper dies to Canadian yet again, by the way. Canadian always winning these engagements. Another on to Kino for Canadian. And now it's Cameraman left outside of the breach, watching as that timer continues to run down, but Soniqs have 3 bodies to throw at this problem, and they can easily dogpile the Brazilian, and that's exactly what they will do. Wandering into the bomb site, seemingly lost. Ambi gets the pickup, and Soniqs immediately turn to chat to try and break the morale of M80.
Yeah, really nice play there towards the end of it. Did like the way that we saw that XU coming out. Of course, we saw M80 getting in. They had the kills onto Cargo. They had a lot of that momentum, but it didn't seem to matter when Soniqs were able to jump on that disable. Canadian inside the site was so massive for his teammates. Yeah, he let them get some space. He let them get inside of tank. They dealt some damage onto Surf. Canadian wasn't there for the trade, but inside the site, he came on back, and his positioning was absolutely fantastic in the late round. You saw the value from Rexon as well. As we watched some of these highlights, his ability to get those kills out on the roam while his teammates dealt with the site presence that was coming out from M80 was really, really nice to see. Canadian continuing to have massive impact in the vast majority of these rounds, and it seems like every single round that Soniqs are able to win.
Well, final round of this very first half, and Soniqs in an excellent position right now. Just going off of the last 2 matchups they have, Soniqs had their hands full with wildcard on that very first day, but it was the first official match of this new look of SQ, with Canadian and Surf joining the team. And not just 2 players joining an existing team, but when you bring in an IGL and somebody like Canadian, you're going to expect to see some changes to the way that the team plays. So there were growing pains. Wild card, giving them a good run, but SQ ultimately winning against DZ, who themselves had made some changes after losing this IGL of Canadian to Soniqs. Did not have a really great result. So if you go over that first match, 7-5, Soniqs managed to win in all the rounds, but then they pummeled DZ just as they are currently doing to M80. Was that first matchup just a one-off? And now that Soniqs are more comfortable, you can actually see them dominate games the way that some people expected. Well, against a team like M80, that would be quite surprising, because on paper, M80 has all the tools and everything going for them to finish first in North America. But just because you look that way doesn't mean that will actually be the way in practice. So M80, one final round to keep this close before they move on to defense.
Soniqs in week 1 managed a 67% win rate on their defense. They've gotten at least that in this game, unless we go to overtime. That could maybe be disrupted, and a big play coming out from cameraman finds Surf just walking up the Aqua hallway. Kino's coming in Aqua door as well. They may be ready to go in for a real execute very early on.
Rexon's gonna have the shield right in front of his eyes. There's Kino running in, but his attention is elsewhere. Hyper finally gets the better of his former teammate, a Canadian. A crossfire picks off the shield of Kino, but everything right now going in favor of M80. It's all up to Ambi and Grixer in a 2v4. Waiting very patiently. Ambi's had some very good rounds, but not this time. Spoy finishes him off. Grixer in a very tough position. Now patrolling IT, but getting shot from the back and doing a little bit of damage to the ankles of Hyper. M80 wins 2 on attack. That's the first half in the books. And Soniqs, well, doing what you would probably expect them to do on a map that none other than Canadian is known for. 4-2, the first half favoring SQ.
The 67% stat does remain for Soniqs, so ever consistent, and that's a good stat line to be consistent with. Love the way the cameraman was able to walk up those Aqua stairs and get that round started. They didn't have a beeper on the stairs. They didn't have any barbed wire on the stairs. It was just the barricade at the very bottom of the staircase, and I don't think Surf was able to hear that. If he did, he certainly didn't react to it. I imagine that was just something that he wasn't able to catch. So cameraman quickly came up those staircases, got that free pick, and then what I was really impressed by was how fast the rest of M80 responded. Immediately, cameraman gets that kill on the Surf at the top of the Aqua stairs, and what happens? Well, Spoy and Kino rotate off the roof in through Aqua as well. They make that push coming out with the blitz. They find so much success. They overwhelm the Soniqs defense, and they make a really good push coming out from that Aqua side. So some life out of M80 for sure. A 4-2 I think is way better than a 5-1 coming out of your first half. Yes, you get to move on to the defender-sided half now, and maybe you are a better defense team than attacking team on Nighthaven. But even still, you have so much more leverage. You have so many more lifelines with 2 rounds under your belt than just 1 coming to the second half. So I think that'll give them some life. They should be feeling pretty good now that they've moved on to the second half.
Looking at these numbers right now, there's been a joint effort from M80 on many of these kills, but there's been one unfortunate standout, Grixer, on 1 and 4 that we can see so far. Waiting for an update on that 6th round. Stats and numbers, kills, etc. only pop up in between the rounds, so you have to be a bit eagle-eyed as the kills are not displayed on the player cards in this current format. So, I mean, if you've got somebody like Grixer only dropping 1 to 2 kills, that is not ideal given the role that he's in, but hey, you've got Canadian with 6 kills leading the team. I don't know if that's good or bad for Soniqs, because usually you don't want to see that, but honestly, Soniqs supporting cast is showing up today, and it is paying off.
Absolutely. Sometimes that can change a bit when you swap sides. We'll see if that is the case. It's going to be the same starting bomb site that we saw from Soniqs. It will be top floor, and again, that IT wall ever important. They did pop a mirror window on this. Sometimes you'll see some impact tricks coming out from that mirror window. No impacts being brought on the side of M80. They had some C4s, but choosing to save those for later in the round. And potentially right now as well, Citizen inside of IT, there's nobody to receive the C4 currently, and it's a bit of a patchwork on the wall at that, so it might be hard to even get the C4 outside of the wall. Here's the drop from Surf. Flashbang as well comes on out, and the C4 doesn't quite land for a kill.
So that's something used by M80, but not to any real success. Now it's Ambi down below, popping the mirror window. Might gain some more control for Soniqs as they now look to coalesce around this portion of garage, the warehouse, the rafters in particular, where now a bunch of bees will be shot out by Canadian just to keep those defenders in place, allowing Rexon maybe a bit more freedom to use those X-Kairos and open up the wall. Several crosshairs trained in Rexon's direction, though, so he has to be very careful. All the while this is happening, the rubber will hit the road very shortly. And here's Grixer to try and exploit the backside of this bomb site. Surf getting the very first pick. Hyper will be shaken off of his position. He decides to join up with Citizen before re-engaging, and he can't quite get the shots that he wants. Kino and Spoy down for the count, and just like that, Canadian actually picked up 2 kills in that frenzy, and Soniqs win their first attack.
Okay, an excellent performance from SQ on the offensive side. I felt like M80's defense didn't really have enough there in that round. They had mirror windows, which are great site utility, but they were handled very well by the Soniqs. They had some bandit batteries, but it didn't seem to slow the opening of IT wall. There wasn't a lot of pressure inside a connector. That didn't seem to be too big of a problem for them. And then you had players like Spoit and Kino and operators like Oryx and like Warden who just weren't really able to find any impact on the fragging department either. So Soniqs really doing a good job of rolling over there. They had everything they wanted in that execute. They got the wall more or less open. They baited out C4s, and then they find that gap. They come up the aqua stairs and finish off that execute. Beautifully done. And M80, now we're down to a 5-2 scoreline. I mean, I would be starting to get a little bit nervous if I were them. That's your primary bomb site that you've just lost. Soniqs are not only rolling with momentum, but also seemingly in the chat having a good time as they do it. They seem hyped up. This is going to be a very difficult task for M80 to pull it back.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a terrible spot to be in for M80, who, while we talked about the Soniqs beginning to stage 2, we didn't really focus on what M80's gone through. Their very first matchup was a tough one on paper. C9 BC, the defending major champions, known in Manchester simply as Beast Coast, but now partnering up with Cloud9, giving themselves a new name, but the same roster. C9 Beast Coast only played that single match as they were off our next day. They'll be back today against Luminosity in our third matchup, but M80 struggled against them, winning in overtime. But there were a number of rounds that, in all reality, M80 probably should have won, but did not close out. And I mean, it doesn't matter at the end of the day how close you get to winning, because if you don't win the round, nobody's going to care about that. It's going to be a footnote in the history books. M80 then played up against Wildcard, who the Soniqs faced on the first day, and M80 prevailed by a better scoreline than SQ did. M80 toppled Wildcard 7-4 when Soniqs beat them 7-5 on that first day. So honestly, M80, with the way that they played, 2 victories against 2 relatively tough opponents, at least for now, this is a team that should not be sitting at just 2 rounds to Soniqs 5.
Oh, a little bit of a close gunfight here. It's a 4-man roam again from M80, just like what you saw from the Soniqs. They want to be delaying as much time as they can on these top couple of floors. They could go for picks as well. Spoit will rotate down to the basement. Hyper, Citizen, and Cameraman still remain. Their castle barricades protecting them. They've got escape routes. They've got the cargo stairs right here, of course. Citizen's on the vending stairs, so they've got a lot of ways out. The real question is, how risky do they want to be? And maybe in a 5-2 position down, maybe they do feel like, you know what, we want to go for some swings. We want to get some picks. If the confidence not there, falling back is not a bad option either.
We're seeing a striker get brought out by Soniqs, just as we'd seen Kino play that operator just 2 rounds previously. And I mean, it should surprise nobody that it was Kino who quite liked the shields all the way back in the first half of their attack. Their first quarter, I should say, because that's something you keep trying to make work. Surf drops, and while he had a bit of a slow first half, he's picked it up the second time around. Ambi, the first casualty for Soniqs. Numbers go back to a 4v4. Kino will eject the mirror window, and there goes the hard breach. A Nitro Cell is tossed out. Cameraman dies to Surf, his second kill. Rexon now dropped with Surf not far removed, and Spoit is upstairs doing extensive damage to SQ. Not before Canadian can beat him with a pistol. 2v2, but Hyper's on 5 HP. Will Canadian be able to succeed in this same spot yet again? Grixer finished off by Kino, and it's a big round from Kino as M80 staves off that match point predicament, which could have occurred. It would have been 6-2 for Soniqs if they had won that round, but it's closer than SQ probably wants it. M80 still with some life in them, but they've got a couple more rounds to win to get back on even footing with SQ.
I do find it a bit ironic, perhaps, that Canadian was a couple rounds ago defending down in the basement, had a big anchor player where he got like 3 kills, won the round for his team, and then he puts himself in the exact opposite position where he's attacking on that bomb site, and it is Kino who instead gets to play the anchor roles, maybe giving Canadian a bit of a taste of his own medicine. So you can see how difficult it can be to execute on that bottom floor, even when you're able to have a lot of your players alive for that late round. If you don't fully clear the roam, problems can arise. We saw Spoit coming back to get 1 pick, and then there's just not enough time inside of that site for you to flood in and get a defuse kit down to properly drone out all the correct positions. So Nice defense from M80. They were not full cleared off the roam. That flank came back to bite Soniqs a little bit, but I do think that site play was really the key factor for me. M80 so good inside the basement. Soniqs not able to find those picks as they went for their execute. Another close round, a round that could have gone either way, but M80 proving they're still in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is a team that was going to roll over and die. M80 has way too much fight in them. And again, on paper, a really terrific, skilled team with no, I would say, no real glaring issues. The only one for M80 that I might point a finger at would be bona fide leadership. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen for M80, people who've been prominent on teams before and some big personalities, but doesn't really seem to be hindering them to this point. If you give M80 an inch, they will take a mile. So for Soniqs, a team that has been in the driver's seat for most of this matchup, if I want to keep going with these metaphors, you cannot take your foot off the gas with a team like M80. First assault from Soniqs now. As we transition towards this round 9 play, we'll be opening up IT wall, and it doesn't seem like there's much interest from M80 to deny this, as all they had was a couple mute jammers that could have stopped those X-Kairos from going off.
There's a crazy angle being held by cameraman in the basement, all the way looks to the roof player of Surf. Didn't quite find it there, but even still, it's that basement play that was so successful for Soniqs when they were defending on this site. That's where Canadian got the C4 to win the round, pull back the 3v5 advantage. Cameraman will be in that position now. He rotates up the vending stairs as he doesn't necessarily feel like that's going to be where the pressure is. A minute 30 and Soniqs seem like they want to get some top floor control. They've done a great job with the Brava, hacking some of these default cams. They can move their way in. If Grixter's found a gap as well, they could be in for a great opening pick here if his timing is right. There it is. Citizen down, a big anchor taken off the board. That could crack things wide open for the Soniqs.
There's a lot of depth on M80, but Citizen is always the player that you have to fear in a 1v or 2vx. Now it falls on the shoulders of Spoit, who himself, of course, is no slouch. But the big bad Ben has been removed from this round. M80 now in the final moments. 1 minute to go. We'll watch as they lose some of the floor above them. Now it's Kino's turn to take the fight to Soniqs. As Kino, now on this main floor, will circle around. A shotgun out and a sidearm. Canadian on the Monty will not be a surprise, but at least cause some issues. Grixter dies to Kino. Canadian walking and doesn't know there's somebody not too far removed on his left. That's Hyper. Kino on a single point of HP, by the way, so he will die very, very quickly. Information now from that default cam as well as the bulletproof camera, giving more info to M80. Final 20 seconds, and this is a bit of a prolonged execute. Canadian going for the Ninja Turtle plant, shield on his back, a nitro cell from cameraman, and it gets tossed up. Shot away. Canadian pulls off the plant successfully. Rexon with 1 kill onto Hyper. Kino dies to Surf. Soniqs looking to back out as Grixter hits the BM in chat. Spoit with a kill onto Rexon, trying to knock Canadian out of the way, but will now ignore him. Soniqs getting all the trash talk in the world in the chat itself, costing Rexon his life. Spoit now ascends upstairs. A lot of points to be had by shooting away at utility in the drones. He dies on rafters. That catwalk. Oh, so good for Soniqs as they hold down above the bomb site, and they go on to match point, Jesse.
They do, and I think that's a great example of the understanding that these two teams have of this map. Both teams wanted to defend storage by playing C4s down below the bomb site. That was both teams' defensive strategy. When M80 had to attack that, they went in the storage window, they went in the storage door, they tried to plant storage. Kino, Monty, 5 HP, got tickled by a nitro cell, died, the whole push fell apart despite a 2-man advantage. Soniqs, what do when they're faced with the exact same setup, or at least a very similar defensive lineup? Well, they go into control. They plant on the other bomb site. They go to where you can't get denied from down below. Maybe if the nitro cell goes through the floorboard, then it's arced correctly. Maybe you can get a denial, but with perfect coverage coming out to shoot the C4 and a shield on the back of the planter, it was going to be so difficult for M80 to ever deny that plant playing down below. They had to make some other type of move to deny that plant either from above or horizontally. None of that ever came out, and Soniqs giving him some criticism for that in the all chat as well. That means that Soniqs now move to match point. SQ have not won Nighthaven Labs since the Atlanta Major. With Canadian coming onto the roster, though, that may be all it takes for them to finally come out and win Nighthaven Labs once again.
I mean, you've got the general himself corralling his troops into victory. You saw when he joined SSG, the impact that Canadian had immediately. The team struggled for the first month or so, but then after that, they won the US Nationals and a World Championship soon after. With DZ, it took a little while longer, but competition was far stiffer. Brazil as an entire region had also elevated their game, which meant it wasn't just NA and EU winning things. And suddenly, DZ wins a major, but it takes quite a bit of time. Canadian is always successful when he goes to these new rosters, sometimes sooner, sometimes later. How is he going to fare on SQ? So far, the answer is, well, he's pretty much immediately. The system is working. Soniqs have guaranteed themselves a single point, and for M80 to win, it'll take them winning quite a lot and about 30 more minutes of gameplay for M80 to exit this match with a favorable result.
Spoit and Kino trying to get aggressive, get something going for M80, the two youngest players of this team, knowing that they have to do something to get their team back in it. It'll be Canadian on the Monty pushing this Garage player out. Spoit's on a drone. You saw that as well. You've got to imagine he's not long for this world. The question is, can he get one with him? It'll be Surf to go down. That's a good start from Citizen elsewhere on the map. And that's a Breach player dead as well. That's going to make it really, really difficult at this point to actually push in through the IT Breach.
Surf has also been outstanding this second half, climbing up to an almost even 5 and 6 through all the rounds. At one point, his numbers were underwater, but he caught the wave, so to speak. Canadian still leading the team at 9 kills, tied with Kino, who also sits at that same total. Kino doing it not necessarily on attack. He's been quite good on defense. He's rocking the Warden. Everybody on M80 at full HP for the moment, and we're just at the 1 minute remaining mark.
Yeah, the plant's going to come in from Aqua Hallway. That's where Canadian's positioned right now. They've got to get some pressure onto these players inside of this bomb site. The Kino shield is going to be massive. How do they deal with that? Well, Parker, so far, it seems like they just don't.
Well, it's a flawless round for M80 to keep themselves in this matchup. If Soniqs are to prevail, they're going to have to really work for it as M80 keep clawing back whenever it seems like SQ has the upper hand. Win a round, M80 blunts your momentum. Go to match point, M80 prevents you from securing all 3 of those points. Still 2 more rounds for Soniqs to clinch this. A fight right now for M80 to stay organized. And again, you can still see the frustration showing over the player cams for M80. Maybe a bit of ambivalence on the face of Hyper, but Kino, usually a player who is very jovial, not been showing much joy this time around, and I think M80 will be beating themselves up if this does end up being a victory in Soniqs in regulation.
Wow, plenty of rounds still to go for the Soniqs. Yes, they've lost top floor, but that's typically considered to be the strongest bomb site, so not the end of the world for that to be lost by them. They'll head to the basement now. We start to see Spoit really come alive in that last round. He got 25 kills through the first week of the North American League, more than anybody else on his team. They're going to need him to come alive and him to be contributing to those kills if they want to be able to make this comeback happen against the Soniqs. It'll be another roam-heavy round. It's going to be a 4-man roam once again. Spoit starting at the top floor inside of IT at the moment. Maybe a bit of an aggressive play coming out from him. With the Boss G, of course, is what you see on Vigil most of the time. Hyper, Citizen, and Cameraman will all be supporting around the mid-floor as well, while Kino holds down the basement. The Soniqs already losing one. Citizen with an aggressive peek takes down Ambi, and this could be another round where M80 look to close the gap.
Yeah, that's a really hard loss for Soniqs so early in the round. Citizen doing that on Valkyrie. Do we not see a Boss G ACOG on the board from Spoit?
We do.
So yeah, losing your Nomad. In terms of utility, obviously you bring Nomad as your anti-flank operator, and on a map like Nighthaven Labs, both of these teams have shown that they really like roaming, especially when the objective is being focused on. There were times on their defenses when Soniqs would retake either the floor above or below to deal some damage to try to stop M80, and now M80 has been doing the same to them. Because I think that very first defender round for M80 where it was Citizen that was playing over the hatch over top of the bomb site, wreaking havoc on the execute for Soniqs. Losing a flank watch operator early on is not ideal, and Ambi will have to now go on to cams to help his teammates.
You have a man advantage, but you don't really want to leave the roam yet for M80. There's still a minute 35 on that clock, and there's a lot of soft breach on the side of Soniqs. If you let them, they will rip up these floorboards and make a massive problem when this execute comes on out. So they want to delay a little bit more time. Hyper's actually rotated to the top floor, but he gets punished. Surf was watching for it. The trade from Spoit takes down Surf anyways. Now it's a 4v2. The roam clear from Soniqs has fallen to pieces. They get 1 for their troubles, but 3 players down. A Monty and a Striker struggling against some of these aggressive players as well. Citizen with a Nitro Cell. This is going to be very difficult to pull back, and the Castle Barricades continuing to slow their progress as well.
Here's the final minute, though. If Soniqs can find a quick pick or 2, this round becomes far more winnable. But really, just clearing out that first floor when you've still got work to be done, targeting this basement makes things for SQ very, very challenging. And honestly, this could go well into overtime. I expect us to see close to 15 rounds with the way that M80 is treating this defense. 1 pick from Grixer after Canadian had died means that it's all up to Pablo, who drops and gets shut down by Citizen, making things look relatively easy. That Ambi pick really did not do SQ any favors, and they struggled to get back in the game. And, well, with the scoreline being as tight as it is, Soniqs have figured it's a good time to settle things down as they call their timeout.
I believe that was a quick 4K coming out from Citizen, the former player for the Soniqs, getting some revenge against his former team. Really big round from him. He loves this Valkyrie play. He's been playing it a lot throughout this map. The second half, he has been rocking a ton of that Valkyrie, and it's been really paying off. That intel advantage that he can give to both himself and the rest of the team has been massive. You saw him go for an early aggressive play, and then when the teammates started to fall on Soniqs, he was the one inside of Cafeteria to continue to apply that pressure. It was an interesting call by M80 never to fall back. There wasn't a single moment in that round where the roamers made the decision, hey, we've got to fall back to site. They were always content with playing aggressive, making sure that they had a lot of map control. I think they knew that even if those last 2 players on Soniqs, even if Canadian and Grixer tried to hit the bottom site, they could come back for flanks. They could play their own vertical utility, and they could probably stop any plant that was going to go down from above. Plus, they trusted their anchor. Kino was down there holding down the fort, didn't need to get involved in that round because his roamers did so well, but had Soniqs chosen to go down there, had they decided that it was in their best interest to go down and try to rush a plant while these roamers were around the top floor, they knew Kino would be able to hold it down. So some good confidence from M80. We're seeing aggressive moves time and time again coming out of their star players, and that could be what it takes to not only switch the momentum, but bring this game back, force that overtime, and then eventually win it in rounds 13, 14, and 15. This will be their hardest task, though, Parker. This bomb site of storage can be very difficult to defend for certain teams. If Soniqs can do exactly what they did last time, ignore that bottom floor, go plant inside of control, M80 may be in trouble. This will be their hardest round to win so far.
I mean, you've got a timeout, so you've got to translate it immediately, or not, you go to overtime. Soniqs secured 1 point long ago, but they want to keep that 2-0 streak alive, where all of their victories have come in regulation, not needing any extra time, which means that Soniqs picked up 6 points. It's why they're sitting on top of the standings. M80 got a victory in overtime, so while their 2 victories are the same as Soniqs, one of them is a little bit different. Same, but different. And they're sitting at 5 points. Space Station and Soniqs are currently tied at the top of the leaderboard. Soniqs have only allowed their opponents to win 7 rounds through their first 2 matchups. M80 is just beating that average right now with 5. And I mean, if you expect M80 to be a top 4 team, this scoreline is nothing to be shocked by. No early picks and no real early action, as we see a Deimos in the hands of Ambi, Canadian still rocking that shield, and plenty of support and utility work from the IQ and Brava to be had.
So Ambi on the drones will notice that there's currently nobody from M80 down on the bottom floor. This is a hold that's decided to dedicate all of its resources to the middle and top floor. That could open an opportunity for a storage plant. Once they get this IT wall open, which they're doing right now, it's going to be very easy for them to convert with a storage window execute. The one problem they're going to have is Kino, who's going to be in that bomb site. He's got the Warden goggles to prevent himself from being flashed out, to see through any smokes that might be coming out as well. Kino is going to be the linchpin of this defense. If they're planning on jumping in the storage window and going for a plant with Canadian on that Monty, it'll be Kino as the primary person to stop it. They might be able to late rotate below. Spoit is on that Solus. And of course, you could see some swings around the top floor coming out from Hyper or Cameraman as well to try to halt some of that vertical pressure and deny that plant from above. But this is going to be a very fun round. It's very different from the last time that we saw Soniqs attacking on this bomb site, but Kino will be the linchpin. You can see how important he is. He knows it. It's going to be all about Soniqs countering that position before they can plant.
Canadian breathing down the neck of Kino. If there's anybody on the side of M80 who knows how to handle a shield operator, it should be Kino. His Nitro Cell almost does the handling on his own, but now it's Canadian to get the plant at the halfway mark. A rotate coming in from Spoit as he might be able to catch this off guard. He gets Canadian right as he jumps out. The Toxic Gas stopping it in its tracks. Rexon with 1 kill, but he's the only one so far. And now Spoit will breathe in the dust as he gets picked from below. Ambi is there in a 1v3. Diffuser at the 30-second mark. If they can find Ambi, then they can easily seal the deal of overtime. Ambi pulling out the sidearm. Kino shuts it down. And it's a 3v0 to disable the case. And M80 on a streak all of their own. They've pushed this match to overtime.
And what a flank from Spoit, who is playing top rafters. He saw the kit was going down and he knew it's my time. Jumped on down, had that impact. Kino wasn't able to stop the plant. He was, again, the main person whose job it was to stop the plant. But when there's a Monty staring at you, what are you supposed to do? He tried the Nitro Cell, did about half damage to Canadian. Then he had to retreat. I was thinking, oh no, this is the end. Once plant goes down, this is a super strong post-plant position from the Soniqs, but it didn't seem to matter. Really good frags came out. Nobody was holding inside of Garage on the side of SQ. They just didn't have the man count to do so. And so Spoit returns to site, downs 2 players inside of the Toxic Babes, gets his own little pressure down as well to start that disable inside of the smoke himself. It was a good effort from Ambi down below. His positioning was great. There was just too big of a man count advantage for M80. And so just like that, they have brought it all the way back to overtime. Soniqs have been slipping, and thank God, because we are finally getting the match that we wanted to see out of these two teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they were helping us get back on schedule after those tech issues that seem to befall these two teams to start off the broadcast. It has been well over an hour since this first match began, and we are still at minimum 7 minutes away from the conclusion. Could be even longer than that. M80 will move back to attack, which was an unfamiliar spot for them over the last 6 rounds. So no real value gained from those 6 on defense. Not like you can immediately then go on to defense in OT. Sometimes teams like to get a little familiar and settle in. And if they do 6 rounds on OT and then immediately go on to the same side of overtime, well, they'll be a little bit poised and ready. Kino foregoing the shield operators. He'll go on Striker, and there's some secondary hard breach in his hands, aided by the Maverick. So not technically bona fide hard breach, but it still gets the wall open all the same.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is going to be an immediate rush on in. Interesting, the Animus wall here is soft. They've got a shotgun to deal with that, so it won't be too big of an issue. Soniqs did use all 10 reinforcements, so they've clearly got some plans for that. It wasn't some kind of a mistake. They don't need to rush this, right? They've got players around the top floor. Opening the breach is priority number 1, but that doesn't mean you need to immediately enter the breach. M80 know how important it is to handle these top floor players. Again, the big problem has been some of these flanks returning back to the bomb site, coming back and finding some of this impact. Kino's inside of Animus. If they can get cargo control, this is going to be very similar to the push that they attempted last time, the one that nearly worked on this basement bomb site. But that control is so critical. M80 needs to be able to find some picks around cargo, make sure that they can cover for that plant as it goes down. It's much easier said than done, and Spoit's in for a lurk as well.
If Soniqs can strike first, their fortunes in this round will go through the roof. And Kino, who has been the standout performer for M80, the only player on the team with a positive rating at the moment, is looking for a kill. Cameraman will get it first. Hyper shut down by Grixon. Citizen will join him in the afterlife as Soniqs double up on these picks. A Nitro Cell tossed out by Grixer, but doesn't seem to be tossed appropriately as he gets nothing for that explosive. You just saw 1 player on the breach. Now the 2 other players from M80 making up the final 3 are within arm's reach, and Grixer shuts one down. Cameraman dies, so Spoit can survive. But the numbers don't favor M80. Diffuser's in the hands of Kino, but he needs the green light to walk on in. He will have to cross one player from Soniqs first. Before he can do that, it's Surf. He wins the fight. Surf is down, bleeding out. Rexon and Ambi will scramble in the final 20 seconds to shut down Kino. It's done by Ambi. Will Spoit retrieve the diffuser and get it down in time, or will somebody from Soniqs find him and end him? Trying to find a line of sight from above. Ambi just narrowly missing out. Spoit walks away with it. No damage done from Ambi. As Spoit gets out of that position and will now assume the post plant, but Ambi vaults over and somehow wins. An unthinkable gunfight going in favor of Soniqs, and while they weren't able to close out on match point previously, they will have another opportunity to do so as they win the first round of overtime.
I fear that M80's push there was just a little bit disconnected from each other. The plant was coming in through Animus or through the assembly wall, right? They had the defuse kit in that area where they wanted to try to push. And usually if you've got the defuse kit in Animus, you want to plant just inside the doorway, but that requires cargo control. And they didn't have any control over cargo. Instead, the bulk of the players on M80 chose to come in and take Exosuit. Now, Exosuit's a great area of the map to control if you're trying to plant in through there, but they couldn't plant there because they were still all the way on the other side of the bomb site. They were outside the breach. If they wanted to plant inside of assembly, they'd have to book it all the way through the site. You saw how difficult that was. They attempted a couple of plants there. They constantly got denied, either from above or some horizontal trays coming out from those anchors as well. So that push from M80, just not able to connect. I really enjoyed that decision from both Ambi and I believe it was Rexon to rotate up above. They know how strong vertical is on the basement bomb site, so they reacted perfectly to that push that was coming out from M80, and they've set themselves up into another match point situation. But Parker, they've had so many of these match points, and they have yet to convert on even one of them. Can they do it in these next two rounds?
Yeah, I mean, they moved to match point all the way back in round number 9 and then lost 3 in a row. They get to overtime, and they win, and now they are back on match point. And even if they lose this round, the very final round sees both teams on match point. So at minimum, Soniqs will have 4 attempts to close out this match. A 5th is possible if M80 wins here. And boy, oh boy, will you be kicking yourself if you cannot convert that most crucial round. It doesn't matter how quickly Soniqs were able to get to match point. It matters only if they can complete the job and actually win the whole thing.
It's going to be another very complicated execute. 2 players on the top floor, Spoit and Hyper. Spoit getting jackal tracked at the moment. They want to be able to deal with these threats before they come back and bite them in the butt. If they can play together, they might be able to get some trades, get some opening picks, but that pressure is there. Soniqs seem to know where these players are at, and it will be the goal of Ambi to clear these guys out of the top floor, get these kills before they can deal any more damage.
Both Grixer and Surf have stepped up huge. Grixer with 8 kills now to match Surf's 7, just surpassing him. And Rexon gets the leadoff pick on the Citizen. Spoit had taken some damage early on in the round too. Not much, but potentially half a bullet's worth. Rexon, yet another, as it's all up to Spoit and Kino. Very suddenly, things have gone from bad to worse for M80. The tide's turning, potentially, not in the favor of M80. Spoit with 1 kill immediately sees the shield of Canadian, tries to get out of there. Spoit finishes him off, and Spoit is now equalized, or at least as close to it as he's going to get. 2 kills for Spoit. Soniqs still with a numbers advantage of 1 with just a little bit over a minute to go. They are in excellent shape to close out this matchup, but when you've got Spoit and with the way Kino's been playing today still on the board, it's far from certain as to what the outcome of this round will be.
Soniqs are expecting some aggression. They know that it's a dire situation for M80. They're a 2v3 with very little sight inside of the bomb site. So Soniqs are playing this slow. They're very concerned about a flank. They are constantly watching for it, but it's not really coming out. Spoit's going to push up cargo now. That could be the play that they try to make, but they've got to time this right. With the jackal track coming out, it's just going to be so difficult for them to make the move to claw back this round. Their only advantage, if they have anything, is the clock.
Just found where Spoit was, immediately used those Inox on Jackal to find out Kino's position. So Soniqs have that information. There's a shotgun ready at the door from Kino, and if the Soniqs are not prepared for this, this is an easy 2-piece for Kino, who's going to go for the swing. Can't unfortunately get the second pump. Surf wins the duel. Spoit will need to clutch out. He's got 2 kills so far. We'll need to find the next 2 as he creeps on up, but Ambi shuts the door on an M80 comeback. And it's a team effort from SQ as they manage to pull off a victory. They do not let match point slip through their fingers once more. They sacrifice 1 point in the immediate, but they still get a victory. And Soniqs, despite the scare, prevail 8-6.
Maybe it's a little early, but I really think this Soniqs team is quickly building an argument to call themselves the best team in North America. Yes, things started to slip in that last couple of rounds of regulation, but once it got to overtime, the ideas that came out, the tactics they had for all of those pushes were so well put together. You could see how confident they were pushing as a unit and making sure that they had that fantastic plays coming out from the Soniqs in that game.
And that's it for our very first matchup. It was a long one, but we finally got there in the end. 3 more matches to come. Sit tight.
Flash, you have a flash. You can swing off the flash, swing off it.
The scanner's on. Yo, kill me, Trey.
That-
2v1, play together.
Can you plant? Can you plant across?
Yeah, I'm gonna plant.
Yo, you
He's
should
close on me.
and play for
We should
kill.
play for kill. We should bait this and go for
Okay,
kill.
okay. Touching this.
Let's go! Let's fucking go!
Good shit, boys. Good shit.
On the stage. Again, not a confirmation for playoffs immediately, but that if the trend holds true, then
Nope.
Soniqs may very well be the first team going to the bracket. But we're not saying anything yet. We're just saying.
Playoffs secured.
You're saying it now?
Yeah, playoffs secured. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not trying to jinx
just
it
going.
here. I'm just going off what the
you were
stats say
saying.
here.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, if obviously history has repeated itself, if you started out 3-0, you've been making it to playoffs, so why not just call it here that they're making playoffs?
I don't know, man. It's NAL Siege. History does tend to repeat itself quite a
It
lot.
does.
Yeah, I
Fox,
think
good game, right?
Yeah, it was a great game. I think the most important thing to take away from that is M80 was going to be Soniqs' biggest matchup of the stage. If you look at every other team currently, it doesn't really look like there's any other team that would give them as much of a fight. We'll have to see how it plays out. But on paper, we thought M80 was going to give them a fight. And thank God they did towards that second half of the match. Because the first half, it just looked like M80 just had no idea. Soniqs played great, but it looked like M80 had no idea how to attack at all.
If just their first attacking rounds were any indication, this thing could have been over much faster. The way Soniqs attacked versus the way M80 attacked, if we just look at those two openers, this game could have been over way sooner.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at round 1 specifically from M80 and how they approached that top floor attack, it was extremely sloppy. They didn't utilize the shield properly. It was poor. Then when they went to execute, it just completely got dismantled. Then you switch to the other side of Soniqs and you look at their attack. They got the site control, they got the map control, and it was about, I believe, 40 seconds left in that round that you would just see them completely collapse and constrict the site and take the round beautifully. That just M80 didn't. But all I want to say, though, what really flipped the switch for M80 here to really come back was they started to play aggressive and they started to play together, and that's what made this map so close.
Yeah, thankfully their defenses off of playing each other and not letting the shield play from Soniqs be able to impact them as much as Soniqs wanted to. It really looked like a good back and forth between how a shield should play. Soniqs was playing the shield correctly, M80 was playing against it well. But M80's shield play was lackluster, very slow. It didn't look like it was going in the right entries. They didn't really know where they wanted to use Kino on that Blitz or on that Monty, and time again, they couldn't get into the fight. And before we got to the start of the game, we said it's going to be the attacks that lead the downfall of M80. And if M80 actually would have been able to start catching up on attack, once they got to that defense, they were running away with it because they were just fighting the shield head on, fighting the entries head on, and they weren't giving SQ those picks. And it was just really beautiful to see M80 on defense. And if they can turn the tides and make sure their attacks are good, then that's the first thing they want to look into going to tomorrow.
Close game, but we get to see what Soniqs do to be a little tenacious in overtime to close things out. And we have Rexon on the line to talk about how this game went. Dude, congratulations. You guys are having a phenomenal couple of weeks, so good job all around. Talk to me about how this game ended. You guys go up to match point on round 9, take attack on round 12, for round 12, right as everything starts getting hectic as they made it get more aggressive, then close things out in overtime. What's that back half of the game like for you guys, and how did you refocus to win an OT?
So when we were playing, we know that on defense, these guys play extremely slow and they try and bait you guys out. I assume it's cameraman or Ben IGLing. So defense is pretty easy, just hold it down. They're going to try and create false pressure and then hit somewhere else. So obviously defense went well. We got to attack and they were just giving us a lot of the map. They would show face, eat a couple drones, fall back, and that actually played out very well for us. So, we started doing that, racking some rounds up. And then as soon as I think we got, 6-3, they started getting really aggressive, and that is what we struggled with in that match. So, they would get a pick early. I think one of them then impacted the castle, killed Ambi, stuff like that, and it was catching us off guard. So after we lost that round, hit the timeout, it was just, listen, guys, reset, sync up, doesn't matter what they're doing. We know they're going to get aggressive. So, for example, Surf 9 to the C4, we knew he was going to C4 that. We knew he was going to do that, and we called to help out on the wall, but it was just a misplay. And then when we got the defense, it was just, hey guys, calm your nerves. It's going to be okay. On defense, same thing. They're not going to move. They're not going to get aggressive, and that's what we did. We just sat still, let them run into us, win the round, and then on attack, it was all right. Play it slow, and then I saw a gap, so it kind of contradicts that. I got the kill, and then we just held it down and played our man.
Well, I want to say congratulations, and I touched up on you just recently about how well you've been performing so far, and even into this game. I mean, what's allowing you to have that success, but also, what's it like? You've been here since day one on Soniqs. What's it like now with Troy on the roster, and what does that allow you to do as a player now that you couldn't maybe have done back then?
So I will say, throughout previous iterations of Soniqs, we've had, obviously, different rosters, different players, and obviously my previous teammate, Ben's on M80. The roles never really fit well, and on top of that, I actually am playing the role that I'm supposed to. I'm not on Hard Breach, which was a ridiculous iteration of the team. I'm allowed to have the freedom that I want, while obviously playing within, my parameter of what I'm supposed to do as a team. So if I had a certain utility, I got, sure. But if I see a gap, like I did as Jackal, I saw the gap, I killed the guy, and I mean, that's how we won the round. So I would say the difference is that we all trust each other, and a very big thing is that whenever somebody makes a play, say in practice, and it comes to game day, and you make that play, and say it doesn't go well, you're not getting scolded or it's not being brought up at the end of the match like, yo, what are you doing? Like, you an idiot. So I will say my teammates trusting me, and then I think we have pretty good chemistry, and the type of players we have on our team, we mesh very well. And then especially with Troy leading us, Troy's always been a really good IGL, and he's always been like our rivalry DZ. He's always been their IGL. We'd always go head to head with him, like NAL, and then depending on where we place at majors. So now that he's on our team, and as he said before, it's like we're more like a group of aggressive players. It's definitely nice having him to lead us and then play the shields or the Cali or the Pulse, like one of two people in the world to ever play that character. Just stuff like that. And I'd say we complement each other very well.
For sure.
That's awesome. I'd like to know a little bit more of the in-game decisions. So when you guys are giving up rafters against a shield, or when you guys are using a shield and not finding the openings with it, what are the key decisions to happen in-game that makes you guys realize, okay, they have a shield, we should give this up? Is it something that you guys go over the plan, or is it something that's called in the moment?
Okay, so with that, obviously we know, our pregame, all the stuff we have, our Vada view, we know that they play shields, and we know that what they do is they like to bring a lot of the annoying operators like Lion and Ying and Monty and stuff like that, and they like to cause a lot of commotion, and then they bait you. They want to pull the players out of the positions and then kill them and then take where they're not, like shifting the map around. We know they're going to do this. So, for example, with a Montaigne, it's like, okay, hey, they have a Monty. Can we use a Legion or can we C4 him? No, we can't. All right, give them that zone. They can't do anything from there. They still have to open the wall, clear the utility, and that's going to be okay. And then, for example, one of the rounds, I think it might have been the first round of the match, Monty, they came, he took Raptors, I think they grimmed, and then he smacked the Mira. But then Ambi's playing the wall, and he hears nothing. And it's just like, say there was a hypothetical where we stayed there and we fought, there's a chance we could have died instead of playing behind our utility. But instead, we fell back, let them take it, and then for some reason, the Monty just walked away. So then we have Raptors control and we take it back. So I would say it's obviously in the moment, like it's an adaptation to what's being thrown against us. And I think we're very good at that, and that's why it played out very well.
Glad to see you guys synchronizing up so quickly, dude. Again, congratulations. You've got the tough test. You have to get through. You got the first half of the gauntlet is done, but now it's Space Station tomorrow. Any thoughts on them before we let you go?
So Space Station, historically, we haven't beaten quite a long time, but we're going to change that tomorrow. They play very differently, at least from my experience, to other teams. So, no, I think it'll be a really good game. I think it'll be a really good showing for us. If we beat them, we're looking really good for getting, at least the top 6 of the playoffs. We're aiming for 1 or 2, so, that's like, one game to make the major. But, no, I'm looking forward to that game tomorrow because I think there'll be a tough game, but it'll be like a good show. It'll be a good watch, so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, it's a fun time to be both a Soniqs player and a Soniqs fan, certainly from what it seems like. Dude, again, congratulations. We'll see you tomorrow, dude.
Thank you. Yeah, later. Bye.
Yeah, it's two halves of a gauntlet. You got through M80, who were one of the top teams coming in, and then it's Space Station, who are currently ranked number 2 and could shoot even further depending on how their game against Dark Zero goes next.
I mean, they're looking really strong. I mean, truthfully, I misplaced them. I had a misjudgment. I don't want to say it was a misjudgment. It was uncertain. I didn't know what was going to happen with this roster with Troy.
It's an acceptable power ranking with Surf and Troy. You don't know if it's all going to change.
I wasn't sure, but me personally, so far, and seeing how everyone's playing, seeing how everyone's shaping up, sure, we haven't seen much of DZ or C9 play yet, but overall, I mean, SQ's looking to be the best.
Yeah, this is so far going to be their hardest week because they're playing two top 4 predicted teams with SSG and M80. I'm happy to see that M80 didn't just roll over and just get smoked 7-2 or 7-3. It's nice to see them fight back and still show that they want to be competitive and mentally as well. And tomorrow is just going to be a very difficult, different kind of game for SQ, because I feel like Rexon said, SSG is a lot more methodical when it comes to the way they want to play the game. So it'll be nice to see that matchup. A great start for SQ. I mean, them being at the top of our power ranking was not something that either of us had. So if they end up finishing on that top 2 slot, obviously I think they can be nothing but happy after making such a big change like this.
The upside for M80 in this case, if you were looking for any reason to be happy, every single time M80's played with this new roster so far this stage, you have to take them to overtime if you want to beat them. So they've got the tenacity, they have the resilience, just couldn't close it out today. We'll see if they do that later on down the road. We have our next game, and I think it's the one everyone's been waiting for every single stage so far. Dark Zero and Space Station never disappoints, but this one comes under a very different set of circumstances. We'll come back after the break.
It's total calamity, total mayhem inside of the server. Out of nowhere, they find their round back into their favor.
Holding up for the plunder wave!
And I think he might just find it!
Got you tulips in a twist. Hand up boss like communist. No, I can never ever get back all the things I missed. But I'm that man that think you got the gist. Got you tulips in a twist.